What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Two main topics today: Rodgers on McAfee, which we'll get to first, and then part two of my blueprint series, this offseason blueprint for the Green Bay Packers. Yesterday, we did the all-in version. Today is going to be the all-out version. The rip the Band-Aid, start over fresh, nuke everything. I'll get to that more in just a moment, but that will be today's main topic. But I want to talk about Rodgers on Pat McAfee first. I think the biggest takeaway, first and foremost, is that there's no decision yet. And he also sort of basically doubled down and said, I'm going to be on Pat McAfee next week as well, and there will be no decision then. I think it would have been rather shocking to all of us if today we were talking about Rodgers' decision on Pat McAfee. I don't think anyone expected it to be that quick, and nor should it be. I mean, his opening statement, we had all the conversations we wanted to have about football for now, meaning him and the Packers. They're not pressing for any type of specific answer, and I'm not mentally or emotionally at that point, which is totally understandable. He should get time. That is completely within the realm of reason. The Packers should give him time. That all makes sense, but we are now officially in Rodgers Watch 2023, and this is the third straight year that we will have to sort of wait and see. I don't think this is going to take a super exorbitant amount of time. I do think this could last about a month before he makes a decision. I'm sure it'll be, prior to the start of free agency. Hopefully it doesn't go the full 2 months here, but Rodgers going to take his time and decide what he ultimately wants to do, as will the Packers. And that will be something to just sort of keep an eye on. They had those football conversations, and, maybe Green Bay wants to go in a different direction too. I think that's still within the realm of possibility, but this is going to have to be something where they continue to have those conversations and decide what both of them want to do and if it's in the best interest for both Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. He had another quote saying, I think I can win an MVP again in the right situation. Right situation, is that Green Bay or somewhere else? I'm not sure. It's got to be both sides actually wanting to work together moving forward, and I think there's more conversation to be had. Those two quotes have been a bit dissected through the course of the day. The first thing I want to mention is that I know a lot of people have been dragging him all day for he wants to win MVP. What about winning a Super Bowl? Would maybe that be a little bit better, having a team first attitude rather than a me first attitude and those sort of things? Listen, he was asked about his play individually and whether or not he thinks he can still play at a high level. And he said, yes, he can play at the highest level. He can win the MVP. That's the mindset of a four-time MVP quarterback, that he can still play the best, be the best, go out and perform at the best. I have no issue with that answer whatsoever. Personally, for somebody who said 2 times throughout the interview of some things are better left unsaid and some things are better off just implied, to me, bringing up is that in Green Bay or is that somewhere else? We're going to have to wait and see. To me, that's better off left unsaid. When he said earlier in the interview of hey, never say never, I get that. Of course, we all know that a trade possibility is out there, right? He could ask for a trade, or Green Bay could, say, hey, maybe it's better off to do a trade. That we all know that scenario is at least within the realm of reason and within the realm of possibility. So the hint, hey, never say never was probably enough to sort of double down with it at the end of the episode and be what's the right situation? Is that Green Bay or somewhere else? Need to be in the right situation to win the MVP. That sort of, to me, implies that he wasn't in the right situation last year, which it probably wasn't. Sammy Watkins, Amari Rodgers, probably not the best situation to win a MVP in. Royce Newman and Jake Hansen at your starting right side of the offensive line to begin the season, probably not the right situation to win an MVP in. Injured, broken thumb, injured ribs, probably not the right situation to win a 5th MVP in. Totally get all those things. And as I've said all along, this is not all on Rodgers, and Rodgers is still a really dang good football player, no question about it. But to me, that's just something that could have been left unsaid. And because we all know, hint, hint, never say never anyway, that to me just almost seems like a slight to the organization of this organization that has spent a ton of money and resources and everything to try to bring him back to Green Bay and make him the highest paid quarterback. And now it's I don't know if this is the right situation anymore. I don't know. Just don't say it. And then we don't even have to talk about it. Do I think it's anything egregious? No. Do I think we need to dissect this thing to the nth degree? No. Do I think he was having a casual conversation with his buddies on the Pat McAfee show? I do. So I don't think we need to take anything too seriously here at the end of the day. I think the two takeaways to me, he wants to play. There's no way, if you listen to that interview in its entirety, especially as it went on, at the first part, it's I'm just not really mentally or emotionally ready to make a decision. By the end, it's like, yeah, I can still win the MVP. Like, by the time the interview got done, what his gut feeling is. It's not to say that it couldn't change in the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, etc. But clearly his gut feel is that he can still play, and I have to believe that he still wants to play. That was my takeaway from it. Feel free to comment below if you feel differently, but there's no way you can convince me that you watched that full interview and took away anything other than he wants to play. If you would have asked me prior to this episode, what are the odds that if he does play, that he plays in Green Bay, I probably would have said 90-10, maybe somewhere in there, that he's in Green Bay rather than somewhere else. I think I'm more like 60-40, 50-50 after that interview, bringing up the, hey, never say never, and like, hey, is Green Bay the right situation? Like, in a couple different occasions, that to me is a little bit more telling, a little bit more interesting, and the door seems to be a little bit more open than I maybe thought it was previously to him playing for another team. So we'll see. Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. We are officially on Rodgers Watch 2023, and we will keep you updated here with any little thing that comes up moving forward. So let's jump into our main topic for today, and that is going to be our blueprint for basically tearing this team down from top to bottom and just ripping the guts out and making it basically a skeleton team. And a couple things I want to say about this. First of all, you're going to be much better off if you watch yesterday's video first. That was part one. This is part two. You're going to understand, I think, everything and how this whole process works a little bit better if you watch yesterday's first, but you will definitely be able to get through this if you didn't watch yesterday's too. So don't feel like this is for nothing. That's my recommendation. The second is this is much closer to what I would do than yesterday's episode of going all in. I think this is a much healthier version, but as I've said all along, there's no easy decisions here. Number three, today's episode is going to be painful as we go through this. There are players that we are going to release and trade and all those sort of things that it's not easy to do, and it's painful to go through. And then I think the last thing here is you have to ask the question, when you're going through an exercise like this, if this would be the direction that they want to go in and ultimately did go in, what are we trying to accomplish with that? So what we're trying to accomplish is to get financially stable. We've borrowed money from the future, to pay for the 2020 team and the 2021 team. The 2022 situation isn't the greatest. You're going to have to borrow more from the future, no matter what you do, just to kind of get under the salary cap and be able to keep, basically just get under the salary cap and be functional this season, no matter what direction that you go in. So the goal is to get off some of these huge contracts, get younger, purge the older players, and basically save a ton in future salary so that you're opening up a window probably for 2025. You're not when you go to now Jordan Love, which is you'll see in a second where we go here. Your goal in 2023 is to get an evaluation on Jordan Love and to see if he can ultimately be your franchise quarterback. And then you're probably going to be bad. You're probably going to you have a top 15 pick this year. In 2024, you're probably going to be picking in the top 12, top 10 again, unless things go great, which if they do, freaking awesome. That means you probably found your franchise quarterback, and the team, you probably had a great draft in 2023, and the team is much further along than we ever thought they could. So if you do, that's awesome. If not, you're picking early in the draft again. You're starting to rebuild. Maybe you have to go out and get another quarterback, but at least you're a year closer in understanding that, okay, Jordan wasn't the guy if that were to come to fruition. And now you probably, if Jordan really wasn't, he really struggled, you might have a top 3-4 pick, which you could potentially get up or just stay still and get one of the top quarterbacks in that draft. And then in 2025, you're going to have probably another early pick. And now your salary cap situation is gorgeous as the salary cap spikes. And you have no borrowed money from, those years, the 2025, 2026 years, and you have the whole world as your oyster with all the salary cap to spend, basically 3 straight years of really early draft picks. Hopefully you found your quarterback, either Jordan Love or a first round pick, maybe in 2024 or 2025 that can lead your team moving forward. It just opens up a lot more possibilities, and it opens up a window in 2025, 2026 to be ultra competitive with a ton of salary cap space, young talented players like Jair Alexander, Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, hopefully Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, and hopefully the Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Zach Tom, etc. still under contract. And then now you've got money to spend. You've got a bunch of, few years of high end draft picks to put on your roster. And now the hope is that by that time you're cooking with gas. The alternative, of course, is that you don't do that And then we're still talking about the Packers salary cap being an issue in 2025, 2026. Maybe you had to trade away Love because he demanded a trade. You're further away from finding your next franchise quarterback. Like, it just delays everything. So if the feeling is that you don't think you can win a Super Bowl this year with Rodgers, and you don't want to mortgage more of the future, then the best thing that you can do is start getting under the salary cap. You're not trying to compete this year. You're not trying to compete next year. You're you're starting to look at 2025 and forward. So you look at every single player on your roster and start saying, all right, if this isn't a core piece in 2025, 2026, then we need to purge them sooner rather than later. See if we can get any assets in return. If not, it's just better to get under the salary cap and get salary cap responsible from here on out for the next couple seasons. So that's what we are trying to accomplish. This is closer to what I would do. I wouldn't probably go the full rip the Band-Aid. I think there's a couple things I would do slightly different, but I am closer to this than I am yesterday's for sure. The other thing I will add here, to me, this is the least likely of the options. I'm going to try to go over a couple more middle ground options, one with Love, one with Rodgers. I might do that as one episode or two separate, not sure yet, but that'll either be tomorrow or the next couple days. But this is still an option, a way that Green Bay could go. But I don't think this is a franchise that's a full rip the Band-Aid rebuild sort of team, even though I think it kind of should be a little bit more, especially with not having a owner and having a lot more flexibility to, kind of take a step back and not worry about it, firing everyone in those situations. This is not a team that is typically done these sorts of things. So we will see, but without further ado, here is today's episode on a rip the Band-Aid version of the 2023 Green Bay Packers. All right, so we are going full spreadsheet mode for the second consecutive day. As mentioned, make sure to check out yesterday's video if you haven't already. You're going to recognize this view and this basically this team that we started with yesterday. A couple changes right away, though, from yesterday. The first is that Aaron Rodgers is no longer on the team. More on that in a second. We are not going to tender Josh Nijman the $4.3 million. You could just do a right of first refusal, but to me, if you're going to go in this direction, this is a little bit of a tough one. But the reason I don't go here is because my main goal is to get salary cap, just to have a functional salary cap moving forward and to get as under the salary cap as you can moving forward. And to do that and to not borrow money from the future, not bringing back Yash was the best possible scenario. If you think you could potentially tag and trade him, then, or not tag and trade him, but do a second round tender, he signs it and you can trade him after that, then obviously go that direction and try to get resources. If you don't, maybe go right of first refusal, which brings that number down a little bit. And if somebody wants to sign him to a huge contract, you tip your cap and say best of luck moving forward. Jake Hansen, we are not going to sign to the exclusive rights deal. But the big one here is Aaron Rodgers, of course. And in this scenario, if you're going all in, or excuse me, if you're going all out and ripping the Band-Aid, clearly Aaron Rodgers is not a part of that. He wants nothing to do with that situation. He said so on Pat McAfee as well. So this could be any of the scenarios, right? Meaning he retired, in which case I'm going to take the full cap hit right now. I don't want any in future salary caps. So I'm going to have him retire prior to June 1st. Let's say he asks for a trade to another team. That could also be the situation here. I'm going to say that even if he's traded, just for today's purposes, so we can basically go in either direction, that if there was a trade, that it's for conditional future picks. So we're not going to see any immediate draft compensation. If you could get immediate draft compensation, awesome, better. You could start building that team even better right now with younger players. So that's great. But just so we can kind of keep this ambiguous of whether or not this is a retirement from Rodgers or a trade for Rodgers, we're not going to add any additional draft picks to today's simulation, so to speak. So Rodgers is gone, though, via retirement or trade. He's no longer on the team. And either way, whether it's a trade or retirement, we are doing it pre-June 1st so we can take our medicine fully and take a full $40.3 million cap hit. So what we end up with is a salary cap that we have a ton of work to do with. Over 46 million dead that we're going to have to deal with and get under the salary cap. So we have some significant work to do. So let's start off with making some releases. So that's the next step here. And actually, I'm going to take a step back for a second. So with our initial roster, just as a reminder for those who weren't here yesterday, all of these players are free agents. Cobb, Lazard, Lewis, Tunyon, Lowry, Reed, Hollins, Wilson, Ballantine, Nixon, Amos, Ford, Levitt, Crosby, and then Tyler Davis and Chris Barnes are restricted free agents. So they're not even in the salary cap equation. There might be one or two that we bring back. I'll get to more on that in just a moment. So we need to get some players cut though. And this is where this becomes extremely painful. And I'll note once again, of course, you're going to make phone calls on all of these guys. You're going to call any team to see if there's interest in Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, Preston Smith, maybe not Garvin and Hamilton, but Rasul Douglas. If anyone wants to trade draft capital for those players, 1,000,000% you do it. But just for today's situation, we're going to say that we call around on Jones and Bakhtiari and others, and there just wasn't the interest based on Bakhtiari's injury, based on Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Jones's contract. So we're not going to add any additional draft comp today. If you can get it, awesome. That's just not the point of today's episode. If you get more capital in because of it, it's even a bonus on top of it. But unfortunately, as much as it sucks, that means goodbye to Aaron Jones. That means goodbye to David Bakhtiari. That means goodbye to Preston Smith. That means goodbye to Garvin and Ladarius Hamilton. A little less tears shed for that, but means goodbye to Rasul Douglas, and it means goodbye to Pat O'Donnell. So those are players that we are moving on from immediately. We're going to save $9.5 million on Aaron Jones. That's going to be the remaining dead cap on Aaron Jones. So we're going to have 9.5 in dead cap on Aaron Jones, 23 dead cap on Bakhtiari, 9.7 million dead cap on Preston Smith, just a slight dead cap on Garvin, 3.5 dead cap on Rasul Douglas, and 475,000 on Pat O'Donnell. The bigger thing here is we are doing all of these pre-June 1st as well. We are taking all of our medicine right now, not pushing things into future salary caps so that we can start getting right. As I've mentioned before, that is the main goal of today, that we can get well below the salary cap for future years. So we have a windfall of a huge chunk of money, let's just put it that way, of money to spend in future seasons when hopefully after a couple maybe not so great years with some premium draft picks included in that, you have a really good young core nucleus. Hopefully Jordan Love is a part of that as a franchise quarterback. And now look the heck out, because you would be absolutely on fire if that situation came to fruition, and would absolutely be in some significant playoff conversations. Because let's be real, we are seeing teams that don't have, yes, if you have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, like those guys, you are going to have a Joe Burrow, you're going to have a chance to go to a Super Bowl every year, just like Rodgers was in his prime, right? But you know who else is going to have opportunities to go to the Super Bowl? Brock Purdy is going to have a chance to go to a Super Bowl. And some of these younger quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence and Jalen Hurts, who is drafted the same year as Jordan Love and got the opportunity to play actually. It's not necessary. We've seen Nick Foles win a Super Bowl. We've seen Trent Dilfer. I know it's a while ago now, but like Trent Dilfer win a Super Bowl. We've seen Tom Brady well past his prime win a Super Bowl, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily Mahomes or Burrow or someone in their prime. You can have just a really good quarterback with a really good surrounding team. So that's what we're trying to do moving forward. So it sucks to say goodbye to a lot of these players. It sucks to take some really significant dead cap money into this season as well, but that's what we're going to do. So that is going to get us a little bit lower. So if you look at, we'll see it in just a second of where our number's at, but we have one other transaction to make here, and that's the same one as we did yesterday. We're still going to trade away Darnell Savage, and it might seem a little counterintuitive to a team that is wanting to get younger and not give away draft assets to give away a draft asset for Darnell Savage, but this is going to help us not have to borrow money from future salary caps by restructuring other players that are currently on the roster. We're going to have to do some of that anyway. More on that in just a moment. But getting off this $7.9 million cap hit for Darnell Savage is going to be super important to make this work and to make sure that we're, again, not borrowing a crap ton of money from future salary caps. So unfortunately, we're going to have to do that as well. It means saying goodbye to a 4, but we're going to get a 7th back. So you're only, you're losing a few rounds on a draft pick. It's not the end of the world. They're going to get a 5th comp pick for MVS, and they're going to have a lot of draft capital in the coming years. So this isn't anything that I would be super upset about. Maybe you can get this down to a 5, and not include the 7th or something. Maybe there's some things that you can work on, but I'm still willing to give up Darnell Savage in a 4th to clear the salary cap space and make things a little bit easier on the cap moving forward. That gets us to some restructures and some extensions. All right, so we've got Kenny Clark, who we're still going to have to restructure. We're not going to do all the void years. We're just going to take a simple restructure, and we're going to save $10.3 million on Kenny Clark. We're going to do an extension for Rashawn Gary. We're going to put his, we're going to sign him to a long-term deal, make him one of the highest paid players at his position in the league. And then we're going to say that he still counts about $7 million on this salary cap, but we're going to save about $3.8 million on Rashawn Gary. And then we are going to do some restructuring of Jair Alexander as well. Once again, not any void years or anything like that, anything crazy, just the simplest restructure. And we're going to save about $8.8 million on Jair Alexander. So that's going to make it so that we can actually make this entire scenario work. All right, so then we're going to get to re-signing some of our own players and signing free agents. And what you'll notice here is with all of these moves now, even including the two that I just mentioned, now we've actually got some working salary cap space. We nuked a lot of our roster. We restructured a couple players, but we've got some salary cap space to actually work with here. All right. So a couple names we are going to sign. I meant to highlight this one in yellow. My apologies. But Gardner Minshew. I do think you need some sort of veteran QB to go with Jordan Love. I think Minshew is a great option. You're probably going to have to sign him to a multi-year deal, which means some of his salary cap is going to be a bit higher as years go along. You're going to have to probably structure that because 2.25 is going to be light for what Minshew would probably get on the open market. Probably more of like a 4 or 5 million would be reasonable. So that's one where you're going to have to pay a little bit more later. I'm okay with that because he's still young, and I do think you need a veteran to supplement Jordan Love in some capacity. So Minshew is one that makes sense to me. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, don't care all that much about the names. This is just to kind of give you an idea what Green Bay can do. And then the only player I'm re-signing is Keyshawn Nixon. Once again, this is probably going to be a multi-year deal. This will go up in salary a little bit as time goes on, but I think you can probably get this down to about $3 million if you absolutely needed to, again, to make this entire plan come to fruition. Nixon's still only 25, and let's just be real. With the team that we're about to build, you're probably going to be returning kicks a lot in 2023 and in 2024. So why not have maybe one of the most electric returners in the league to help you out with a lot of returns over the next couple of seasons? So Keyshawn Nixon, we're bringing back. That is it. That means no Cobb, no Lazard, no Lewis, no Tunyon, no Lowry, no Reed, no Hollins, no Wilson, no Ballantyne, no Amos, no Ford, no Levitt, no Crosby, no Tyler Davis, no Chris Barnes. Not bringing back any of them. We're not that, none of those players are players that we're super concerned about when we are talking about 2025, 2026. And Keyshawn Nixon is the only one that I was really looking at from a re-sign standpoint. And I do think it's important to get some sort of veteran quarterback. So if you want a different name here, by all means, put a different name than Minshew. But for me, I like Minshew. That's why he's there. All right. Then we're going to get to the draft. Once again, do not focus on the names. It doesn't matter. I don't care. This is just to give you an idea. All right, so they're going to get 2 wide receivers, Rashee Rice in the 2nd, Darius Davis in the 7th. They're going to take a tackle, Broderick Jones in the 1st round. They're going to get Joe Tippmann, the center from Wisconsin, in the 5th round. Jaquelin Roy, defensive lineman from LSU, in the 3rd. Yasir Abdullah in the 5th. Darrell Luter Jr. in the 7th at corner. Ethan Evans, a punter, in the 7th as well. So that is their draft. Remember, they don't have a 4th round pick because they traded it away to get off of Darnell Savage's contract in this situation. But you get a couple young receivers. You get a nice offensive tackle to hopefully replace David Bakhtiari moving forward. You get some competition for Myers. You build up your defensive line with a 3rd round pick, which we know won't turn out anyway because Packers 3rd round picks are not allowed to turn out. It's just science. They get a Yasir Abdullah, young edge rusher in the 5th round, and then get a punter that maybe works out, maybe it doesn't. Get a corner that maybe works out, maybe it doesn't. It's 7th round picks, doesn't really matter all that much, right? So that's where we're at. That's our draft. And then we're going to sign some undrafted free agents, and we're going to grab a couple free agent signings. We're going to grab Max Williams, who's still he's like 28 years old, I think, but he gives you a little bit of a tight end option, a little bit more of a veteran tight end there. We're going to go and we're going to get a couple edge rushers because with Gary coming off an ACL, we've got to have a couple guys. So Malik Reed, Anthony Nelson, some cheap options that could come in, probably be 1-year stopgaps, but make it so that you don't just have to go with a returning Gary from injury and then a 2nd-year player and a rookie. Gives you a little bit more depth there. We needed some safeties, so we got a couple guys that were in their mid-20s and Ronnie Harrison and Donovan Wilson. Nothing that's going to be too exciting or sexy, but guys that can maybe step up and at least compete with guys like Carpenter and Gaines as well. We're going to grab Joey Sly at kicker on a cheap contract. We'll have Matt Hack come in and compete for a punting job. We'll grab an undrafted free agent long snapper and undrafted free agents at all these other positions as well. So then we're going to get to our final 53-man roster cuts. We're going to cut a variety of guys here at Lang, a lot of our undrafted free agents, Jeff Cotton, Gugames, Gene DeLance, Chris Slayton along the defensive line, Keandre Thomas, Tyrell Ford, Benji Franklin, James Wiggins, Parker White, Matt Hack, and Jack Coco. So that's how we're going to get from 90 to 53. And then we're going to look at our very skeleton crew 53-man roster. Let me say it again. This team is not set up to compete at a super high level. I do think this team can be, like, depending on what Jordan Love is, I think that they can be like competent, meaning like we're not losing three, or you're not going to go 3-14, 4-13. I think this is probably like a 6-11, 7-10, or 8-9 if things really hit well. Probably closer to 5-12, 6-10 sort of team. But you have Jordan Love and Gardner Minshew at quarterback. You've got A.J. Dillon and then Patrick Taylor, Tyler Goodson at running back. You probably, maybe draft a running back or get an undrafted free agent that could compete as well. Watson, Dobbs, second round pick, Rashee Rice, Samori Toure, Darius Davis, Bo Melton, a very young wide receiver core that you're trying to develop. You've got DeGuara, Max Williams, and Austin Allen at tight end. Broderick Jones and Zach Tom are your starting tackles. Jenkins and Runyon are your guards. You've got Tenuta, Jones, and Walker as developmental tackles. You still got Royce Newman and Sean Ryan, hopefully that they can develop as backup guards. And then you've got Myers and Tippmann competing for the center spot. Defensively, you've got Clark, Wyatt, Slayton. You grab a third-round pick, and you still got Jonathan Ford, a second-year player. Rashawn Gary and Enigbari are going to lead your edge rushers. You get a couple veterans, and then you get a fifth-round pick to compete in there as well. You've got Campbell, Quay as your two starters at inside linebacker, Isaiah McDuffie backing up. You add in a couple undrafted free agents. You've got Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon as your top three corners. Shamar is your fourth. Luter, your seventh-round pick, is your fifth. You add in probably an undrafted free agent. Maybe Keandre Thomas stays. You got a couple veterans in Ronnie Harrison and Donovan Wilson at safety. Maybe one of them hits, maybe not. Maybe one of these is Rudy Ford instead. You could go that direction as well. Tariq Carpenter and Ennis Gaines, you probably want to get them playing time sooner rather than later. You've got Joey Sly as kicker, Ethan Evans, your rookie punter, and probably a new undrafted free agent at long snapper, or just a flyer at undrafted or at long snapper. Probably someone different than Coco. Didn't work out all that well, or maybe you give him one more year to try to see if he can figure it out as well. So you do all of that, and you look at like your starters, right? So you got Love at QB. You got a quality starting running back in A.J. Dillon. You like Watson, Dubs, and a second-round wide receiver. That's not a bad 3 wide receiver set. You got DeGuara and Max Williams. You're lacking at tight end. That's something you're going to have to address in the future. You got Broderick Jones, a first-round pick, and Zach Tom as your tackles. That's not terrible. Jenkins and Runyon is a really good guard combo. And then you got 2 guys competing at center. So it's not like, again, your tight end is an issue, but like everything else is like at minimum like competent, again, dependent upon what Jordan Love is. You've got Clark, Wyatt, and Slayton. That's a good 3-man defensive line with a third-round pick in Jaquel Roy as well. You've got like Gary and Enigbari can be your starters at edge. Campbell and Quay are your starters at inside. You could have Jair and Stokes on the outside with Nixon on the inside. Those are 3 starting caliber corners, meaning Nixon as a slot guy. You're lacking at safety. Safety and tight end probably could have been addressed better in the draft. It didn't fall that way when I was doing the mock draft simulator. I only did 1. So, you need some young safeties. You need some young, tight ends. You need a couple players to hit here or there. But like, this isn't like a completely, like, you don't look at this and be like, man, that is Houston Texans or Chicago Bears from the last couple of years bad. This isn't a 2 or 3 win team. To me, this is a team that can probably upset a team here or there. It is probably going to lose to some teams that they could potentially win against. They're going to be very inconsistent. Not all that different than the 8-9 Packers team that we saw a season ago, to be totally honest. Like I said, probably ends up a 5-6 win team would be my guess. But you're going to end up exactly with what you wanted. You're going to get an evaluation of Jordan Love, right? Which is extremely important. You're going to get a ton of opportunity for these young players to develop. You're going to be able to stay completely financially stable because the only restructures that we did were with 2 guys that are going to be on the roster for the foreseeable future anyway, in Jair Alexander and Kenny Clark. So you don't mind doing those. Everyone else, some of these older contracts, you might be wondering why Devondre Campbell was still on the team, by the way. His contract didn't make sense there was no benefit of getting out of it at this point. And he isn't out next year, which you would probably take a look at that point. But Campbell stays. By the way, Campbell's like the oldest player on the roster. I think he might literally be the only player over 30 on this entire roster. In fact, I don't know anyone else who would even remotely be in the conversation. So like, you've gotten extremely young. You've got some young, talented players that are going to get a chance to develop. You're going to get to see Matt LaFleur's offense. You're probably going to be bad. And you're probably going to get some premium draft selections next year. You're probably going to not be great next year either. You're probably going to get some more premium selections. And then your hope is that by 2025, Jordan Love or another QB is ready to go, or at least start taking a real positive step in the right direction. And now you've got all this salary cap space. You've got all these young players that you've developed, probably 3 years of top 15 draft picks. And now, like I said, you're really cooking with gas, and with a ton of money to spend in free agency, you start really opening up a window in 25, 26, 27, etc. This is really difficult to do. And I know, again, people will be passionate and not want to go and release guys like Aaron Jones and David Bakhtiari and Preston Smith and for some reason Pat O'Donnell, which people are very tied to. But I get it. These are not simple answers. They're not simple solutions. And again, I want to be very clear. I get this isn't this. This is just me in my basement playing with an Excel spreadsheet, right? So like we have to take this. It's not Madden. It's not fantasy football. These are real lives that are affected. I love freaking Aaron Jones. I love like the guy. I love David Bakhtiari. Like I would literally be heartbroken if Bakhtiari and Jones aren't on this team. So as a fan of the team, if I can set, analyst, fake GM, Andy to decide for a moment, like just as a person and as a fan of the team, like I want David Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones on this team. Like who doesn't? Like how do you possibly not want those guys on the team in some capacity? I would love Mercedes Lewis back on the team. Like those are three of my favorite guys to absolutely watch on the team. Mercedes Lewis and David Bakhtiari are my two favorite guys to watch on the team. When I'm breaking down tape every week, I could just watch Mercedes Lewis and David Bakhtiari over and over and over and over. So when I say I like, just get rid of those, it's not easy. It sucks. It's the worst. But if you're thinking at it from, if we want to look at this with a clear set of eyes and an analytical point of view and saying, what could they do to get really financially stable moving forward and start building towards a young team? This is what they could do. I'm somewhere in the middle. I certainly wouldn't go all in with what we did yesterday. Probably wouldn't go quite as far on an all out or a full rip the bandit as we did today in today's episode. But these are the two extremes. Over the next day or two, I'm going to take one or two more looks at what Green Bay could do that's somewhere in the middle and is probably closer to what Green Bay actually does this upcoming season. So stay tuned for those as well. Really appreciate you guys as always. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.